Hi, I'm Peter Jones, Chartered Surveyor, author and property investor, and I had a great question the other day. Danny rang me up and he was asking all about valuing a property. And he had a very particular and very interesting question, which went along the lines of this. He said, Peter, how much value does having furniture in a property add to the value of the property? And at first I thought that's a curious question, because I think most of us would assume that furniture in a property is chattels. It's not fixtures and fittings. It's not bolted onto the property. It's not part of the structure of the property. And so for most of us, furniture is an added extra. It's not there to be valued. When the valuer comes round, the valuer is not valuing the furniture. He's only looking at the bricks and mortar, or she's looking at the bricks and mortar of the property. So furniture doesn't really come into it. So I explained all of this to Danny and asked why he was asking the question. He said, well, I get that. But as a supplementary question, let me ask you this. Is it true that having furniture in a property increases the rental value of the property? In which case, if having furniture in the property increases the rental value of the property, and if rental value ultimately affects the capital value of the property, why isn't the valuer taking the furniture into account? And I thought, well, that's a very smart question. But there's some assumptions there which I want to challenge. And what I said to him was this. I have a portfolio of properties up in the northeast of England, and for the particular type of tenants that I have in the particular areas where I let properties, it's always assumed that the properties will be let unfurnished. Now that surprises a lot of people because a lot of my tenants are actually on benefits, but it doesn't seem to make any difference. They would much rather bring their own furniture than actually use furniture which is already there, and I can understand that. You know, if you've been living in a home and for whatever reason you have to move, you don't necessarily want to start by going and using somebody else's furniture. If you've been buying furniture and accumulating your own stuff, you want to take it with you. You might consider, though, that, you know, there are certain types of tenants who maybe don't want to buy their own furniture, and that can happen as well. So don't make any assumptions, is what I'm trying to say. Go and talk to your local letting agents and find out what tenants in your areas expect in their properties. You may be surprised. Now, some of my properties are furnished. Well, I say that. Two of my properties are furnished, but they're not actually in my main investment area. They're outside of my investment area, and they're let to a different type of tenant. I have a property in Manchester, for example, which is let to a professional couple, and that was let furnished because that's what they expect. But I know that because I spoke to the letting agents and they advised me that I needed to furnish the property. Now, does that affect the value? Well, it certainly affects the rental value because I get more for that property than I would do if it was unfurnished. The reality is, if it was unfurnished, I probably wouldn't be able to let it at all, but in theory I might be able to let it at a lower rent. Now compare that to my properties in the northeast. If I were, for whatever reason, and it's just because I had a bit of a rush of blood to the head, decided that I was going to furnish my properties in the northeast, the reality is I would not get any extra rent because the properties were furnished. Another reason for not furnishing them. The tenants don't want it, so they're not going to pay you any extra rent. They might even ask you to clear the property before they move in. So it doesn't necessarily always follow that adding furniture is going to add to the value. You've got to understand the local rental market and the type of tenant that you're letting to. Very, very important. And I think a lot of people who are starting in property don't appreciate that. But Danny's sort of supplementary question is a good one, because if that furniture adds to the rental value, and I haven't got time to go into it now because it's a mathematical process, but if there's a greater rental value, you could argue that the property is worth more, there's a greater capital value, then surely the valuer should be looking at that and coming to their conclusion based upon the amount of furniture and the way that the furniture adds the value to the property. Yeah, I can see the logic behind that, but it doesn't work like that. Why not? Because ultimately all the value is concerned about is putting a figure on the property so that the bank, if they have to repossess you, and sorry to be blunt about it, but this is all the bank's worried about, if they have to repossess you, they want to know that they can sell the property quickly and easily and get their money back. Things like furniture, because it's not bolted to the floor, could disappear. They've got no way of guaranteeing that the furniture is going to be there in the future. They've got no guarantee as to what condition the furniture is going to be in the future. So you may have a tenant or tenants in the property for 10 years and the furniture becomes worn. That's bound to happen, by the way. We have to replace carpets and furniture on a regular basis if you furnish them. So you can see why the banks and why, as a convention, valuers do not take into account furniture. They're interested purely in the property itself. But I do agree, Danny, that a higher rent may be achievable, depending upon who you're letting to and where you're letting, and that higher rent could, in theory, be used to argue a slightly higher capital value. But that's all a mathematical process, which I haven't got time to go into now. So anyway, really interesting question. Thank you for that, Danny. Don't forget, you can go over to my website. Please do go over to my website. If you're not watching this on my website, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, please go to my website, www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk, where you'll find loads of good resources, including some free reports. There's some paid-for resources, like my ebooks, which will show you how to get started in property, will show you how I got started in property. Loads of great information, so please go and check it out. And of course, there's my blog, and there's loads of other videos there as well. So until next time.